Well, this month I have been sharing some reflections on one of the books that I have read recently. And the book is by Nate Jarvis. And Jarvis was a former executive for Dayton Hudson and Target Corporation. And the book is called Naked Civics: Strip Away the Politics to Build a Better World. And he worked for Target from 1993 to 2010, and then he launched his own consulting company. This book was recommended to me by someone who said, you should read a book by someone who has worked their entire life in business and who is working on issues of the common good and get that kind of a perspective. And it's definitely been a good read and a different perspective than one I often read. And he has spent his entire life working in the business world. But as I've talked about over these last few weeks when I've been here, that his job has had him at the intersection of business and government, because he worked basically as a lobbyist in public affairs in Target, mostly with the state of Minnesota, but also then with the federal government. And the book is his reflection on how polarized, part of the book is a reflection on how polarized things have gotten. And how in government it's so difficult anymore, especially at the federal level, to get anything done because of how polarized it is. And he talks about the anger, what he calls the angertainment industry of Fox and MSNBC and Rush Limbaugh and all the rest. And how much they are in the business of keeping people angry and not really being interested in solving problems, because if problems actually got solved, then they would be out of business. And so their job is to keep people constantly drumming up new problems and angry. And that's how they make their money. And he talks about how much people's involvement in life, in public affairs, has shifted into that area of life and just becoming passive recipients and participants in that anger industry. And when people think about how they're involved, often that's how they're involved. They sit down in front of the TV and they get their dander up watching the shows and listening to the people they like, and they contribute money to those kinds of things. And that's what they think about in terms of being involved. And that's, from his perspective, very unhealthy. And he talks about how they're not interested in solving problems, and the biggest evidence that he gives in terms of them not being interested in solving any problems is, he says, that those who are involved in this angertainment industry have no interest at all in compromising. Compromise is a dirty word. And from his perspective, compromise is the only way that the ball gets moved forward in solving challenges and addressing problems in a world where we have so much difference. There has to be give and take. People have to be willing to give up something in order to get something. And in the world of the Tea Party and the whole host of single-issue advocacy groups that are out there, that he lists a lot of them, compromise is a dirty word. It can't be done. And one of the things that's pretty clear from his writings is that he thinks it's pretty much a waste of time to spend any time working with people who won't compromise, people who will take their marbles and go home if they don't get their way. He's only interested in working with individuals and groups of people who are interested in addressing challenges, who are willing to listen to a different perspective and genuinely listen, and who really believe that the people who are on different sides of the issue are actually good people for the most part. I mean, yes, there are always bad actors, bad characters out there who are not really interested in solving problems, but he says most of the people that he works with, whether they're Democrat or Republican or somewhere in between, those people that he knows are good people who come at things from a different perspective. And when he's out working with people, he pretty much immediately identifies those who are not willing to compromise, and he just, he kind of sets them aside. He's not willing to work with them. He talks about, the shift that has happened in people's involvement in public life. And he alludes to Bowling Alone and some of the other work that has been done in terms of how it used to be that when people wanted to get involved, they went and they got involved in the Lions Club or Kiwanis or YMCA or Daughters of the American Revolution. There were so many different organizations that were in your community that you could go get involved with, and those organizations put you in touch with a variety of perspectives. But they existed for a purpose. They existed for a purpose of serving the community and making the community better. And that every one of those organizations in some way or another was doing something serving the community. And that's how people got involved to make a difference. And those organizations are still out there, but they have been on the wane for a long time. And there aren't nearly as many people involved in those kind of organizations as there used to be. And he says today, when people want to get connected in our world, the first place that they turn to now is they go online. And he said, if you want to find where the action is now in terms of making a difference, that's where you need to be. You need to be online, getting connected with people there. And he said that will put you in touch with organizations that are out there serving people, where you go and meet face to face. But the connection often happens now online. And interestingly enough, I think, at least I found it interesting, that when he's talking about the different organizations where you connect online, he includes churches in that. He says, because most people these days find a church online. And most church organizations now, they're getting together on a regular basis and doing things that the communication that happens in a church community is now mostly online. And so he concludes those churches in those organizations that are mostly online organizations. And he says that there's still a lot of online participation that is mostly not participation. It's possible to be online a lot and to do nothing, to be a lurker, basically. It's also possible to be online and just be online with those anger organizations. But if you want to get involved and make a difference, this is where you go. And this is where he spends his time, in creating online communities that start there and connect people together and then get together and begin to talk about the issues in particular communities where we can begin to solve problems. This is his definition of networking. A network is an interconnected group of individuals who influence one another. Networks are relational, not transactional. And while power can be forced down a hierarchical command and control structure, power cannot be asserted in the network because people self-select themselves into that structure. They can leave when it suits them. And so this is one of the big challenges for organizations. And he talks, the third half section of his book is all about business and working with businesses. And one of the challenges in the business world, from his perspective, is that the networking community has become incredibly powerful. And businesses can be hurt quickly. Very quickly, the word can get out about something, and business can be hurt by that. And how important that is. And it's how important it is for businesses to cultivate networks. That businesses are no longer just selling a product anymore, but they are in the business of cultivating networks and making people care about their products, and they have to prove that they care about people. But it's very much self-selecting. People can come and go in the networks. And true power in the network, he says, lies in the hands of those who wield the most influence, and that often has nothing to do with a title. In a network, trust has to be earned by being involved, by being willing to listen, by being willing to compromise, and then offering something of value to the network. And he has an interesting insight, I think, on what he calls one of the maddening things about being involved in these networks, but absolutely essential aspects of the network, and that is that they're incredibly inefficient. And what he means by that is, he said, if you're in a business and there's a hierarchical structure in the business and you participate in a meeting in a business, he said, there's a clear objective. And you're trying to get something done in the meeting, and the goal is to be efficient with your time and to get through it and to get it done. In a networking relationship, much of the work that happens that's important is done in the area of building relationships. He says, when we know more than one thing about each other, we allow ourselves for more areas of possible connection. And the more connections we are able to construct between each other, the less vulnerable we are to a single disagreement. Our relationships become more sustainable, and it will have more tensile strength. But he says you have to have this mentality as you're getting involved in all these networks that you're going to be wasting time. It's going to feel often like you're wasting time because you're going to have to spend time and understand the important role of building relationships with people and telling stories and listening to stories and getting to know people at a far deeper level than just in terms of having a product to offer to somebody. And he talks in the last section about, in the book, as I said, about the business world and how it's being transformed by the power of networking. And he talks about Target, and he has a number of interesting stories about Target being punished online. He said, just amazing how quickly the word can get out about something. A product that is promised and they don't come through, or the publicity that's come about selling clothes that come from third world countries where the conditions are awful. And he said, in the world that we live in, he said, you have to be constantly building these relationships with people. And then he said, businesses have to realize that they really do have to care about making the world a better place. And he said, his experience in the business world is you're answering to a whole bunch of different people. You're answering to shareholders, and your employees and the customers that are out there, and so you get different voices. But he said, we are moving more and more towards a world where if a business is not in the business of making the world a better place and does not understand that that's the very first part of their mission statement, that they are going to be left behind. And they're going to be punished by the people who are their potential customers, who do care about building a better world. And he talks a lot about, in the last section, he also talks about government, and he says that too many people on the left think that all business is bad. And too many people on the right think that all government is bad. And he said, the fact of the matter is that there are lots of incredibly good businesses, and there are lots of incredibly good people working in government, and much government is doing good things. And he says one of the things you have to realize is that if you want better government and you want better business, then you have to be supporting it. And in terms of the networking with business, he talks about how it's really important for customers and consumers to use their money wisely and to support the companies that are working to build a better world. And he actually has a whole section at the end of his book listing companies that he thinks are good companies. That's a very long list, and he probably has more online because he has an online presence. But he said there's two things you need to do. One is you need to buy their products. And the second thing is you need to be participants in their network and get online with them and talk to them. He said companies really care now about having this online presence and want to listen to people. And it's really important to be part of that network. And the same goes for government. It's much easier than ever to be not only informed, but to be part of the conversation in government, particularly local and county and state levels. There are all kinds of networking opportunities about public safety and water quality, garbage pickup, parks and recreation. I'm suddenly finding myself in my neighborhood in the midst of this garbage collection, a garbage collection issue. Because we have, Burnsville doesn't have one single hauler, but it has a whole bunch of haulers. And I think a lot of our communities have that. And we currently have 6 haulers. I live on that cul-de-sac. We have 6 haulers come around our cul-de-sac. So in the summer, that's up to 18 trucks that are coming around our cul-de-sac, tearing up our street, doing destruction to our street. And we have all these kids in the neighborhood, and they just come plowing around and plowing around. And we went to the city, a couple of us, and talked to the city about single hauler, and the city said, nope, it's competition. But the city said, we very much support you as people in the community to go talk to your neighbors and see if you can convince your neighbors to have a single hauler. And he said, the city said, we have worked out a deal with the hauler. If the community agrees to a single hauler, and a neighborhood agrees to a single hauler, you'll get a better rate. But you have to do the work. We're not going to do it for you. And that's the kind of thing that is out there that he's talking about, that these opportunities to be actually involved in local government are there all over the place. To get online, and you will be immediately connected with people who share your interests and concerns, and that's the way you get things done. And so the biggest takeaway from the book, I think, is that the opportunity to make a difference, from his perspective, has never been greater. That it is much easier to be connected with companies and businesses and other communities. It's much easier to be connected with government and people who care about government and want to be involved in government than it's ever been before. And there are just countless opportunities to be part of different networks where you can get involved and learn from other people and share your insights and then begin to make a difference. But the key issue for us is, as I talked about a few weeks ago, to realize how much time is wasted on the anger part of it. Spending time in front of TV or listening to the radio, and all of that time that could be better used finding communities and networks where people are making a difference, and then dedicating some of our time to some of those communities. And that's the only way, we want to make the world a better place, and to see change is to get involved. And the opportunities are endless for us to do that right now. So it was a good book. I think I had a feeling as I was reading this book that there's a lot of really big problems in the world, and I'm not as convinced as he is that they can be so easily solved by commerce and government, but like global warming. But nevertheless, to have someone from his perspective who's spent his life working in government and business and bringing those people together, and to have just one positive story after another of talking about Minneapolis and crime and all the stories that he tells about Target Corporation and being involved in different areas and making a difference. It was a good perspective. So I would recommend the book. It's a good read. Thank you for listening.